starting to see people join. It's so nice to see you. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to give it another few seconds, maybe 30 seconds to let people come in, and then we'll get started. This is GoToMeeting. We have an interface on the right that you'll use to communicate with us. If you have any trouble with GoTo itself with a platform, please put your questions into chat. And we have a couple of DLC staff, Lauren and Liesl, that will help you. If you have questions for Scott or I, your panelists, please put those into the questions pane, also on the right side under questions. And Scott and I will be answering those questions live. If you have so many questions that we don't get to them all by 3 p.m. today, Eastern Time, then we'll make sure we answer by email. And again, thank you for being here. I am going to turn off my video, and so is Scott, once I get started, and then we will turn on our video once we start answering questions. So let's go ahead and turn that off, and I will begin. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Okay. At its core, light pollution is simply too much light in the nighttime environment, more than what naturally occurs. Anytime we install electric lighting outdoors, we're introducing some level of light pollution. The key isn't to eliminate lighting altogether, but to be intentional, to only use what we need to use the right type of light at the right time and turn it off when it's no longer needed. We know that human-caused or anthropogenic light pollution is getting worse every year. And it's not just about losing our view of the stars. Light pollution affects people, ecosystems, and nearly every species on the planet. And anthropogenic light at night often hits underrepresented communities the hardest, especially in dense urban areas, where light trespass, sky glow, and excessive nighttime lighting can become a constant presence. You've probably heard the saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But when it comes to lighting, what's in Vegas definitely does not stay in Vegas. This false color image from the National Park Service shows night sky conditions over Lake Mead back in 2016, more than 25 miles from Las Vegas and separated by Frenchman Mountain. That white, pink, and red glow in the center, that's light from Las Vegas. It's about 200 times brighter than a naturally dark sky. And this was nearly a decade ago, before luminous landmarks like the Sphere added even more light pollution. Today, Las Vegas sky glow can be detected as far away as the Grand Canyon, 200 miles from the Strip. Our 7 Strategies publication outlines key approaches for minimizing light pollution while also reducing energy use. These are high-level, application-based strategies designed to guide better lighting decisions. Today, we'll focus on 2 of these strategies. First, how minimizing blue-violet light helps limit sky glow. And second, how lighting controls can reduce both energy consumption and light pollution. Before we get into the application strategies, though, a quick note on how Luna fits in. Luna is the DLC's dark sky program for outdoor lighting. It addresses both application considerations and product selection so that decision makers can better understand how to evaluate quality, energy efficient, controllable lighting that reduces light pollution. On our website, you'll find sample ordinance and bylaw language, a US-Canada outdoor ordinance map, and a library of technical and educational resources. The Luna Qualified Products List, our Luna QPL, lists outdoor luminaires that meet the Luna version 1 requirements. Products are vetted for color temperature, uplight control, aiming limits, and controllability. Every Luna listed product also meets DLC's solid state lighting version 5.1 requirements for energy efficiency and lighting quality, so they save energy while supporting good visibility. With Luna version 2.0, eligibility widens. We're adding lamps and retrofit kits, expanding allowable non-white LEDs, including amber and low CCT options, and introducing select turtle lighting product types that use specific amber LEDs with tighter limits on distribution and total output. Avoiding blue light at night is one of the most effective strategies we have for reducing light pollution and protecting wildlife and ecosystems. But here's the challenge. There's no single consistent definition of what blue light means or how much is acceptable. Most regulations and guidelines use CCT, but CCT is just one of several spectral metrics used today to limit light pollution. In 2023, Tony Esposito and I published a paper in Lucos where we compared several of these spectral metrics and offered recommendations, both on which metrics are most useful for assessing sky glow and how to properly characterize amber LEDs. In practice, we're seeing more amber LED products specified to reduce or eliminate blue light emissions. But when I say amber LED, what exactly do I mean? And just as important, what will you get from a manufacturer? Do you need a narrowband amber product, or will a broadband amber product meet your needs and any applicable regulations? These words show some of the terminology used by manufacturers and certification bodies to distinguish between product types. The names shown in orange refer to narrowband amber, while those in yellow or white indicate broadband amber. It can be confusing, not just for lighting people, but for decision makers in conservation or policy who aren't lighting specialists. That's why clear definitions and consistent nomenclature are so important. Right now, still a bit of a Wild West, but standards are catching up. There's no lighting standard currently linking LED color names, like direct emission amber, to specific regions in color space, so manufacturers often define them independently, leading to potential confusion. We do have an updated NEMA standard that includes 1800 Kelvin and 2000 Kelvin bins. This is called NEMA C78.377, and this paves the way for more consistent product options. And Tony Esposito, a frequent collaborator of ours, and I are also co-leading a NEMA C78 working group focused on standardizing color names for non-white LEDs, like amber, with guidance tied to technology type and color space. And these new color bins are important because of how blue light contributes to sky glow. When everything else is equal, we have the same illuminance, we have the same distribution, products with lower CCTs and amber LEDs produce less sky glow. This graph, adapted from the Lucos paper I mentioned earlier, shows blue light content on the x-axis and relative scotopic sky glow on the y-axis, using a tool from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, or PNNL. Here, we set HPS to 1 as our baseline, and LEDs with CCTs of 2200 Kelvin and above generally have higher sky glow than HPS. That is, their RSG value is greater than 1. And the higher the CCT, the worse it gets. I want you to notice the height of these boxes. Even products with the same CCT, say that 3000K whitish box on the right, can vary a lot in terms of blue light emissions. And that means very different sky glow levels. So while CCT is commonly used in regulations and guidelines, it's not a reliable predictor of sky glow. Now that we know that blue light contributes to sky glow, and that light doesn't stay confined to your site, even if you're not in Las Vegas, how can you make more informed design decisions? One useful approach is to calculate the lumens leaving our site and weigh them by spectrum. Let's walk through a hypothetical example. Say we have a retrofit project at Las Vegas High School, shown here, and we're using LED lighting. Once we have our lighting complete and we've met our IES standards, the first step is to estimate how much light is leaving the site and contributing to sky glow. We can do this by creating a virtual measurement box around the property using lighting software, similar to the approach used in the model lighting ordinance. Next, we'll add illuminance calculation grids to the virtual planes of the box. These grids face inwards to capture all the light leaving the site, including direct light from the luminaires and reflected light from the ground and building surfaces. To calculate the off-site lumens, that is the lumens leaving the site, we'll use a rearranged form of the inverse square law. This means that we multiply each illuminance value by the corresponding area on each surface, sum all those values up to get the total photometric lumens leaving each plane of the box. Next, we weigh the off-site lumens using that relative scotopic sky glow value, or RSG. This allows us to compare how different light sources, like white or amber LEDs, contribute to sky glow based on their spectral characteristics. We use this great tool from PNNL to compare how different outdoor lighting characteristics affect sky glow. This tool does not model site-specific layouts, but it's wonderful for exploring how spectrum and uplight contribute to sky glow. Here, we're focusing on spectrum alone, looking at the relative sky glow across different spectral power distributions, or SPDs. You can also import your own SPD data into this tool, which makes the tool even more useful. But I want to mention that distribution matters too. Even with the same spectrum, say a 2200 Kelvin LED, increasing uplight by just 2% can increase your relative scotopic sky glow by 25%. And in that Lucas paper I mentioned earlier, we use this PNNL tool with a near observer and a scotopic weighting function. The chart here shows how observer location and the weighting function affect the results. Under clear skies with little air pollution, it doesn't seem to matter much whether the observer is close or far from the city, but it does matter whether the calculation is unweighted or scotopically weighted. Since humans are more sensitive to short wavelengths in low light, using a scotopic observer gives us a better picture for how sky glow affects night sky visibility for people. We strongly recommend getting the spectral power distribution data, or SPD data, and using it in the PNNL sky glow calculator to understand how your lighting contributes to sky glow. But we know that's not always possible. So this table compares how the average scotopic RSG values vary by CCT group. While RSG generally increases with CCT, you can see it getting bigger as the CCT increases towards the bottom of the table. There's a wide variation, even among products with the same nominal CCT. And that's because, again, CCT alone isn't a reliable predictor of sky glow. Remember those tall CCT boxes I showed a few slides back. Instead, we found that the SP ratio metric is a much better indicator of relative sky glow due to spectrum. Lower SP ratios consistently result in less sky glow, all else being equal. The third column then shows you average SP ratios by CCT category. Let's bring it all together. This table and chart shows the impact of applying scotopic RSG values to different light sources. Instead of using HPS as the baseline, let's choose a different LED color. Here, we've chosen a 2700 Kelvin LED fixture as the baseline, and so it's assigned a relative RSG value of 1. As you can see, choosing amber or lower CCT products higher in the table results in less sky glow or lower RSG values, while a 4000K product could increase the sky glow by around 40%, depending on the SPD. You'll see those same results applied to the offsite lumens, the weighted offsite lumens in the chart on the right. One important aspect I haven't shown here due to time is that each design scenario will also have different offsite lumens depending on your fixture performance, depending on its light distribution and the total light output of each fixture and its location relative to the edges of the site. In all cases, weighing the off-site lumens by RSG estimates the site's contribution to sky glow more completely. This is a pretty simple method, but it offers far better insights than using basic photometric layouts or relying on CCT alone. Now, as we just saw, choosing amber or low CCT LEDs can significantly reduce sky glow by limiting blue light. But it's important to understand that there are trade-offs, especially around energy efficiency and lighting quality. Direct emission amber LEDs, or narrowband amber LEDs, and PC amber LED fixtures potentially increase your client's energy use by 2 to 5 times because they're not energy efficient. Lower CCT white LED luminaires tend to be somewhat less efficient than higher CCT luminaires, but the gap in efficiency isn't as dramatic. And when it comes to color quality, direct emission amber is similar to low pressure sodium. It's very poor. If you really need it, like in the case of turtle lighting, it's an important tool, but it shouldn't be the only lighting tool in your toolbox. PC amber is better in terms of color rendering, but it's still not as good as white LEDs. And since 1800 Kelvin and 2000 Kelvin LED products can vary widely, always request the SPD from the manufacturer. It's essential for understanding both sky glow and color performance. Now let's look at how lighting controls can reduce both light pollution and energy use. Most of us already use controls to meet code requirements, but they can do so much more. With network lighting controls, you can apply high-end trim to prevent overlighting, you can dim lights at night to meet ordinance requirements, or adjust seasonally for events like snow cover or bird migration. And what's powerful is that light pollution reductions decrease alongside energy use. So if you dim your lights by 50%, you'll reduce sky glow by 50%. It's that direct. So yes, controls save energy and reduce light pollution, but keep in mind they may not fully offset the spectral impact of high CCT lighting. Looking at the spectral outcomes in conjunction with your photometric layouts helps clarify the trade-offs and guide smarter choices for your clients. Now let's take a look at a DLC case study that uses this process to compare energy use and cost of LED luminaires designed for light pollution mitigation, specifically Luna qualified or Luna eligible products, versus those luminaires focused purely on energy efficiency. This digital twin study was conducted with Valeria Holland and Tony Esposito and focused on 2 real-world applications in Fort Collins, Colorado, a high school campus and several downtown streets. Because of our time restrictions today, we're just going to look at the high school campus results. We looked at 3 scenarios. First, a baseline with HID fixtures, a 4000K LED retrofit scenario focused on energy savings, and a 3000K Luna retrofit scenario designed to reduce light pollution as well. We chose HID as a baseline to highlight both the energy savings of LEDs and the differences in sky glow. This is especially relevant even today, since light pollution has been increasing by about 10% per year, aligning with the rise of high CCT LED replacements. So let's walk through this high school example. The baseline fixtures used undimmed metal halide products. The first retrofit, or RS1, used DLC qualified 4000K LED fixtures, dimmed 50% after curfew. And the second retrofit scenario used Luna qualified or eligible 3000K LED fixtures, dimmed to 80% after curfew, and selected lower lumen packages as needed to avoid overlighting. All 3 scenarios met the IES lighting standards, so comparisons are fair and performance equivalent. Let's start with energy savings. Switching from metal halide to 4000K LED fixtures in retrofit scenario 1 cut the power demand by 50%. In retrofit scenario 2, we reduced it another 20%, mainly by avoiding overlighting, still meeting IES targets without using more light or energy than needed. Now let's look at sky glow. The baseline metal halide fixtures had a 4000K CCT and a scotopic RSG of 2.5. In retrofit scenario 1, the 4000K LED fixtures that we chose had an RSG value that was higher, and as a result, our sky glow increased by about 10%. In retrofit scenario 2, we reduced overlighting and uplight, and our 3000K LED fixtures had RSG values of 2.2, resulting in a total of a 43% reduction in sky glow values pre-curfew compared to the metal halide baseline. And as I mentioned earlier, dimming reduces energy use and sky glow proportionally. So in retrofit scenario 1, where we dimmed our 4000K system by 50% after curfew, cut our sky glow in half, offsetting the higher RSG of these products. In retrofit scenario 2, the sky glow from the 3000K system drops to just 11% when dimmed by 80% overnight. That's a win for the environment and a win for your client's energy costs. And with that, I'll hand it over to Scott.
So for the most part, here's where we were about 10 years ago in terms of controls. We had hardwired remote controls using 0 to 10 volt dimming and step dimming to match light levels to the use case. And for me, at least, it was really an aggravating and often time consuming to implement. Today, we have seemingly endless choices in control methods, including my favorite, which are fully integrated controls on board the fixtures. In my electrical engineering role, I'm really a generalist, and there are lighting designers that design control schemes for large projects with complex scheduling and dimming profiles. In my work as an electrician, I do exclusively small commercial and municipal building exterior lighting retrofits. And inexpensive onboard dimmers for high-end trim with motion sensors is all that's needed to drive dramatically reduced energy use and sky glow. With the 1800K zero uplight wall packs I install, even before adding motion sensing or time dimming, I see energy reductions of 75% from legacy HPS products and relative sky glow reductions even greater than that. The key thing to know is that exactly the same controls can be used with non-white sources. If you don't see them offered from your preferred supplier, you should ask for them. The major manufacturer control options don't change for their Amber products. In my experience, talking about low CCT product has been far less effective than simply showing it. And this is a photo I took of the color rendering performance of a low CCT fixture. What do you think this is? So when you think of non-white light, is this what comes to mind? If your favorite color is ANSI 70 gray, like mine for electrical panels, you might like it. But I'll forgive you if you shy away from specifying low CC LEDs if this is the sum of your experience with warm sources. This is high pressure sodium. Here's some additional photographs I took while testing security camera performance over a wide range of CCTs and light levels. What do you think this one is? Check out the very acceptable color rendering of the middle source and how much improved it is from the high pressure sodium. Yes, this is 1800K LED. And how about this one? You all had inside knowledge that we're talking about low CCT and non-white lighting. But when I've done lighting demonstrations of these with electricians who are used to installing 4000 and 5000K fixtures, they never guess anything below 2700K for either of these. And after sharing just some of the negative impacts of blue spectrum light at night, I've successfully converted electricians who previously only used 4000 Kelvin to 2200 Kelvin simply by letting them see the performance for themselves. And I've installed dozens of selectable CCT fixtures set to 1800 Kelvin on various public buildings in 3 communities that previously had high pressure sodium and 5000K LEDs. And nobody has yet asked me to switch them to anything higher. And the comments on the very warm color have thus far been universally positive. And here's how these low CC products stack up against what you're likely specifying. When you see these side by side and understand the dramatically higher sky glow impact that the higher CCTs have, I'm confident you're going to want to add low CCT and perhaps even non-white sources to your specification. And that's why we're here. So let's get started on how to go about that. This is a new area for many specifiers, and unless you end up specifying only these types of products, you aren't likely to internalize the choices and the nuances. These recommended notes come nearly verbatim from a paper that Leora co-authored with Tony Esposito, a paper that resulted in the expansion of the CCT quadrangle definitions in the ANSI standard. Having these notes directly embedded in your specification and ready to reference will make editing so much easier. Do this as a favor to your fellow specification editors as well. And if your specification references the ANSI standards, be sure that the 2024 version is called out. That's the first version where the 1800K and 2000K quadrangles I just mentioned are defined. There are some additional definitions you'll want to add for non-white sources as well. And these terms are not generally well understood, and defining them for the contractor and suppliers is going to be key to getting what you want and avoiding as much submittal churn as possible. Likewise, your regular submittal requirements likely won't cover the details well enough when it comes to non-white sources. Requiring SPDX files will allow you to verify claims about spectral power distribution and allow you to calculate an SP ratio with this data. Leora has already mentioned how important that is. I've been using CCT as a proxy for SP thus far, but only because it's where the spectrum definitions and specifications typically begin and end. But to really know the relative sky glow impact of the fixtures that you review and approve, you'll need the SP ratio. So today I chose to use the AIA master spec format as one example for incorporating these low CCT and non-white sources into your current specs. We're going to cover the changes in these 4 areas. The handout also has the Federal Unified Facilities Guide specification with recommended additions to that spec. In the following slides, the new text is bolded with blue shading. Where recommendations are listed, they're either green, yellow, or unshaded. When specifying non-white sources, you need to adjust your expectations in some areas, and efficacy is one of those. Efficacy for sources not defined in the ANSI standard can be very low by comparison, and this speaks directly to the need for balance that Leora addressed earlier. Rated life is another place where, depending on the type of non-white light, expectations need to be tempered. You may want to choose the lower of the 2 master spec defaults. Some 1800K and 2000K products can be very similar to the high CCT products. In my world, most of us are only familiar with specifying CCT to define the color of light. For some of the non-white sources, CCT still works. It obviously works for all the white sources that are defined in the 2024 ANSI standard. While we're on the subject of white sources, let's think critically about which CCT is appropriate for outdoor lighting. If you need to use white light and know the great color rendering and efficacy available at 2200K, in my opinion, that's your best choice. 2700 Kelvin is okay, but has a significant sky glow penalty over 2200. I'll say that choosing anything above 2700K is something I wouldn't do, and I've come to believe that your future self may look with regret at choosing that for many projects, knowing the full story that Leora shared earlier. The non-white sources in the 2024 ANSI standard can still be defined by CCT, but for the non-white sources outside the ANSI standard, you'll need to define your desired spectrum. This recommended nomenclature comes directly from the Radetzky-Esposito paper. And I'm really not proud to admit it, but I'm enough of an electrical engineering generalist that CRI is still what I think of when defining color render performance, and is still all that's in most specifications. But I do recognize that isn't enough. The TM30 standard and the easy to use and free online calculator is something that's invaluable for all products, but especially when looking at sources outside of the ANSI standard. For DLC qualified products, I can easily get that data. For this presentation, I'm only looking at simple modifications to the standard specifications, not additional language written around TM30. The default CRI and master spec are generally too high for non-white sources. In addition, CRI doesn't work for direct emission amber. Even for white light, a CRI for outdoor fixtures of 70 seems adequate for most applications. With non-white light sources like 1800 Kelvin and 2000 Kelvin, you can use CRI requirements like 70 plus. But for chips designed with less than 2% blue and PC amber, your expectations need to change, and you need to be willing to accept a lower CRI if that's of importance. For direct emission amber, CRI is essentially meaningless, and it's a negative number. So including anything about CRI for a direct emission amber is unnecessary. We really want to thank our collaborators today, Kristen from Mead and Hunt, Chris Wilson, and Legia were a great help to me in preparing this presentation.
Thanks, Scott. And I would like to thank the DLC members and my colleagues at DLC, Tony Esposito for so much collaboration, and Valeria Holland for collaborating with us on that DLC case study. And of course, the ANSI 78 working group members. Together, we've published one standards update, are working hard on another. And the members of our Luna advisory group, who are invaluable to us as we look at making progress on reducing light pollution in 2025 and beyond. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and Scott and I are going to answer your questions. So let me stop sharing this and show myself. Okay, and let's look at questions. All right, there's a lot of you here. That's great. Okay, let me pop this out. Okay, not sure where chat is, but wanted to say thanks. All right. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right, so we have one question here. Should the vertical sides of the 3D prism used in sky glow calculations only extend down to the luminaire mounting height, rather than all the way to the ground, to avoid including downward directed light that doesn't contribute to sky glow? All right, I think that's for me. I will answer that question. So we took the box all the way to the ground because the edge of the box is at the edge of the site, right? It's basically at the perimeter of your site. So you still want to include downward directed light, but you want to make sure you capture all the light that's leaving the site that is not useful to the site application itself. I have not done an analysis where we only took the boxes partially down. We basically use the same process that the MLO uses to make sure we capture all of the light leaving the site. The key is to be able to look at the site as a whole and to consider the spectrum and distribution characteristics. You could even look at it pre and post curfew if you wanted to, especially if you were changing, for example, the spectrum of light post curfew versus pre-curfew. So let's say pre-curfew you had the fixtures at 2700 K, and maybe post-curfew you have the fixtures at, I don't know, say 1800 K or something like that. You would be able to see the effects that way. That's a good question though. Another question was, what is the CRI on these light sources? Generally, the CRI on those light sources for the white LEDs is 70 to 80. Sort of depends on the LED product. I think a lot of them now are 80 CRI, but some of them are still 70 CRI. I'd have to look back. In the paper, the case study paper, we actually show you all the criteria on the lights that we included. So that data is in the paper. For the non-white light products, it varies by product type. The color addition capability, sometimes for some of them is 70. I think there might even be a few products, 1800K and 2000 products that are 80. If not, I think 80 is in the plan. And some of them are at 50, if I recall correctly. Scott, do you have anything to add about those? I know you've looked at a bunch of products recently.
Yeah, I'll say that the products that I demonstrated there that I installed, the 1800K product is at 78 for a CRI. And I think at 2200K, that product jumps above 80 for a CRI.
Awesome.
I can't speak to the Amber, PC Amber products yet.
Okay. Yeah, I know that Scott showed that IES calculator, the spectral tool that's freely available on the IES website. We really like that tool. So if you can get the SPD data, it even reads an SPDX file. It will give you all of those spectral characteristics that you want, which is fantastic, regardless of if it's white or non-white. Okay, what fixtures provide this lighting and visibility in 2200K? All right, well, I'll speak to one side of it, and then Scott, you can speak to maybe some products you've tried out. So I can tell you that there's quite a few manufacturers that offer 2200K LEDs today in 2025 for outdoor lighting. It's not an outlier anymore. So I think it's a matter of seeing what's out there. I can tell you, for example, on the DLC qualified products list, you can actually filter for outdoor lighting, and you can filter by CCT, so you can actually see which products have these CCTs. But I would also say that if you have a preferred vendor and you really are interested in 2200K, then reach out to that vendor and ask them for it. They might even be able to provide you with a sample so you can try it out yourself in a mock-up. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I'll say, having asked that exact question of manufacturers at Light Fair this year, and then just in the last week at the Street and Air Lighting Conference, the answer was universally, we can build 2200K. It's really not a problem for them to get the chips in the form they need, whatever their form factor seems to be, to make them at 2200K. So I've asked many manufacturers to add that to their product cut sheets so the lighting designers and purchasers know that that's true. The only impediment with manufacturers that don't already offer it as a standard, many of them do offer as a standard offering, is going to be lead time, because they don't have the chips in stock. So it's going to extend your lead time, but the answer I got was it's not going to increase price. It's just going to increase lead time for those that don't already offer it. But there really are multiple options already at 2200K. But certainly ask to expand the options, because they will do it for you.
Great, thanks, Scott. That's a good question. Okay, here's another one. How do these fixtures fare for wildlife and sea turtles? So I will say that the studies, like that Fort Collins study that I spoke to, didn't look at wildlife impacts, and there's no sea turtles in Fort Collins, Colorado. But we do know that there's lots of localities that have wildlife concerns and specifically sea turtle concerns. There's a couple of nuances here. First of all, for sea turtle lighting, there is a lot of established research that shows that narrowband amber, direct emission amber, if you hide the source, if you make sure the source isn't visible to the sea turtles when they're coming on the beach, and if you keep the light levels low, isn't disorienting, so they'll still go towards the surf instead of the water. So we do know there's a spec there, and we do have a spec created for sea turtle lighting, for example, Luna version 2.0. Other wildlife lighting is tricky, even though we are, thanks to exceptional researchers like Travis Longcore and others, we're starting to understand how lighting affects wildlife and how they see light. We don't necessarily know how much light is enough, or how much light is too much, or what the timing needs to be, or if any light at all is going to be disruptive, and we just need to really work with controls to turn it off. So generally speaking, I would say that the recommendations are generally to limit blue light for most wildlife, although there are certainly species like fireflies, for example, that are really disoriented by amber light, and other luminous insects, for example, are disoriented by amber light. But in general, it's just to use as little blue as possible to make sure that you're not using light when it isn't needed. So to use a lot of controls to turn that lighting off, and to prevent light spill and overlighting as much as possible. So keep the lighting where the people are, and remember that lighting is for people. Okay, so in the post-curfew study, 80% dimming case study were motion sensors employed. I can answer this one. Oh, I'm sorry, Scott, did you want to say anything about that prior question?
No, I think there's work that's started now to try and take that compendium that Travis Longcore put together by species and create guidance for particular species if you have a particular animal or insect that you're concerned about. But I think that research, that level of detail is kind of on the cusp, right? It's not available yet that I know of, but it's coming because there is so much interest in that exact topic.
That's right. Thank you, Scott. All right, the next question is, were motion sensors employed in the post-curfew study? We did not employ motion sensors. We were just sort of looking at the, I guess you can think about it as the impacts of reducing spectrum and total amount of light, but you certainly could employ motion sensors. That's a very pragmatic way to get to sort of a high-low or a high-off situation, depending on your code requirements and your own requirements for that client. I would expect similar types of results, but obviously not the same. If you're only, say, dimming down to 30% with a motion sensor, then you'll see slightly less reductions in off-site lumens, but you'll still see big reductions. So I think that's a very pragmatic approach. How about your thoughts on motion sensors, Scott?
Well, I think, the fascinating part to me is, at least in the state of Wisconsin, which is where I do all of my electrician work, is how widely ignored the current energy code adoption is, which only requires a 30% reduction. The new one just adopted simply goes to 50%. But I think, if we were able to get widespread adoption and enforcement of an already existing law, we'd have huge impacts because of that one-to-one, relationship that you mentioned, right? So it's key to get implementation of laws that already exist, and depending on where you live in the country, that varies, right? So I'd really be fascinated to hear from other states actually how well enforced your energy code in terms of outdoor lighting reductions are. I'd love to know a cross section of that situation, because in Wisconsin it's very widely ignored, almost universally ignored.
All right, that's disappointing, but thank you for sharing that. All right, and as I mentioned before, we will be sharing the slides on our website this week, and we will be sharing the recording of the webinar this week. So you will find both of those things on the DLC's website, and you'll be getting an email from us with follow-up information. So I hope you find those useful to you. And I see another question has come in for you, Scott. I'll read it out loud and then you can answer. Is it safe to say that lower CRI is better? And if so, is there a possibility for a move for lower CRI and solid state lighting technical requirements?
I will say that the SPD files I've looked at, the lower CRI had lower sky glow. I can't say that that's universally true, but I would love to see a lower expectation for CRI for outdoor applications, for most outdoor applications. I think the assumption that we need high CRI is kind of a false one. I talk about CRI in presentations I make in the context of you can choose these lower color temperatures and still get great CRI simply to encourage adoption, not to discourage people, but I would love to see it if we had a kind of a mindset change as a community as what expectations are for color rendering need in most outdoor applications at night.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I will say that in terms of the DLC technical requirements, since this was asked, we do have a minimum threshold of 70 for white LEDs, and that does not seem to be a problem for white LEDs. Whether we want that sort of as a baseline for everything is a different question, but we do have that. For non-white light, with the forthcoming SSL version 6 technical requirements, we're not going to have any color rendition requirements. We're going to ask you to report we're going to ask manufacturers to report their CRI and TM30 values, but there's no threshold there. So if it's low, it's low. If it's in the middle, it's in the middle. And that way, we'll get, I think, a much better view, a transparent view of what's out there in the market. Because, as I said, a lot of these are emerging technologies. They're very interesting. There's a lot of potential with these technologies, and what we want to see is sort of more information, because information is sometimes hard to come by. And so we think that will really help, especially in areas like, say, Hawaii, where we have you know, an intersection of regulations and significant wildlife concerns, significant human population desire, you know, for shore and beach access. So we really see a trifecta there where making good choices is critically important for everyone in those environments. All right, let's see here. Another question, isn't CRI a safety issue? Being able to identify color accurately in the case of criminal activity, it's a big issue in urban parks. I would certainly say that color fidelity can be an important part of lighting design criteria. And I think that, you know, when a community or a designer or a specifier is choosing lighting, you know, them understanding the needs of that community and the needs of that area, they need to take those things into consideration carefully. And so there could be areas where you do want to have some color rendition, and having better color rendition is really important. But I will say that what we're trying to show today is it's not a function of amber. So you could have an HPS fixture, just sort of our de facto lighting standard for outdoor, you know, environments for so long, that has an extremely low CRI, extremely poor color rendering, as Scott showed you in that first picture. And then you could have an 1800K or 2000K LED product and have really high CRI and be able to really tell colors apart. You can tell the greens from the blues, from the pinks, from the oranges, you know, across the gamut. You can tell those colors apart and still have that warm color. So I think the choices are so much better now, and there's so much more variety that just being open to new choices and maybe doing some mock-ups and evaluating these things, as Scott has done, can be very helpful. Scott, do you want to build on that a little bit with your experience?
I think the question really kind of points to the need for design all facets of the lighting, not just the CRI value of that lighting, all facets of the use case. So if you think that color rendering and high security recognition of color is really important to that site, and that's going to outweigh a lower sky glow case because it is so important, then that's the decision to make, and that's the correct decision to make. But there are lots of places. I work in a very rural area, and so the highest concern for us, really, because it is already dark, is to try and keep that sky darkness as much as we can to protect wildlife and to preserve the views of the stars that local residents want. And so we don't have the same kind of security concerns necessarily. So I think it's just the use case all around in terms of what source you're picking, how you control it, all those things, right? Whether you're at the low end or the high end of an IAS recommended standard, all those things have to be taken into account when you're choosing your design. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I think that's excellent nuance. Well, I think there's a few technical questions that I think we can take offline that are just about the upcoming SSL standard or SSL version 6.0 requirements. I think otherwise we've answered all the questions here. Unless someone has some last-minute questions for us, we will give you back 10 minutes of your day. We're really happy that you joined us today. I hope it was beneficial. I will make sure that you have Scott's and my contact information. Maybe we can just post that in the question pane. Scott, if you want to put your email in, and if you'd like them to reach out to you that way, and then we can let people have their day back. Let us know if you liked it. I know there's a survey coming. Thank you again for your time. It's nice to see a lot of familiar names and some new names. So thank you again for joining us. We appreciate you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Tuesday. Thanks for caring about the environment with us. We appreciate you.